Now, I feel I ask this every year, but
Sure.
who hasn't heard Luc speak before? There we go. Okay. All right. Well, you're in for a treat. We usually have a bit of fun with this.
There we go.
Wherever you want to, I'm going to give you that.
All right.
We can't see the screen, so feel free if you need to jump up. So, how about, why don't you, for the benefit of those that don't know you, and haven't heard us chinwag before, why don't you give a quick introduction?
Sure. Is my mic on? You guys hear me? Cool. So Luc Bondar, I've been in the US 20 years, Australian by background. My whole career has been largely spent around loyalty marketing. It's funny, I think back to kind of where it all began. I was working with like a big sporting goods retailer in Australia, privately owned, biggest at the time. And the CMO, who was the son of the founders, came to me and was like, hey, what do you know about this thing called relationship marketing, which was sort of the precursor to loyalty? And I was like, oh man, I know a lot, but I'm super busy right now. So can we talk tomorrow morning? And then went home and I was like, what the hell is he talking about? And kind of schooled up on it. We sat down the next day and we then ended up building what was sort of a very nascent, early stage, super simple loyalty program. And that really sparked my interest in the space. I ended up sort of post-university kind of moving into this area and fell in on the services side. So many of you here today are from different vendors. In fact, I think I've worked with a number of you over the years, directly in some cases. And through my career, I've had the benefit of working largely across travel and retail and payments mostly around cards, but also payment networks and different sort of payments models. All of which led me to United Airlines about 8 years ago to come in and take hold of the MileagePlus program and really help build that out. So I've been fortunate to be there through a pretty exciting time for United. We're in a pretty rough spot a decade ago, post-continental merger. Today, it was great to catch the tail end of the Delta crew. Congrats to those guys. I think they run an amazing business. I think we have a great, healthy sense of competition. But they were the clear leader in the market for a long time. And United was, I think, relatively flat, in some cases trailing and falling off. For the last 8 years, we've been on an absolute tear. We've transformed the way we think about and run the loyalty program as a very clear and distinct business. We've built, there we go. We've built a model that really drives the way we think about where loyalty sits inside the business as part of this larger, and we talk a lot about ecosystems as well. I'm going to talk today about partnerships, but I'm going to talk as well about some other areas that sort of inform and drive this flywheel model. But we think about loyalty as a business, and as a business that helps drive the airline. And then in June last year, we launched the first of its kind, a new travel and media network in connected media, which you can see on the bottom left there. And this flywheel model, this ecosystem thinking, that builds on the scale of United Airlines, which today is the world's biggest airline in the world, as measured by ASMs, that leverages that scale, that opportunity to track into the hundreds of millions of customers that fly us every year, to use the loyalty program to build deep, tenured, generational relationships with individuals and households and their family units and their friends and the corporations that they're a part of, and then takes all of those relationships and those eyeballs that we've built, creates amazing partnership ecosystems within the loyalty business that help enrich the traveler's journey, and then take that opportunity across all of our digital surfaces and then extending out into the world to connect those travelers with brands, and with brands who have products and services that are meaningful to those travelers and that are going to add value to the traveler through a very relevant offer, a relevant opportunity, whether it's to earn miles or it's just to get access to a product or service that's going to lift their experience. That's where we've spent a lot of time thinking about this framework and how the partnerships that we have and the capabilities that we've built fit inside it to create this sort of opportunity to scale from the airline through the loyalty relationships that we build, and then with connected media to build a platform that's more than a media platform. It really is a commerce platform that creates opportunities to engage directly with travelers and drive the value that they see through this partnership with us. You can see around the inside, I'm not going to talk to the sort of 6 segments that are around the inside there, but at the core, a lot of this is around creating a framework and an infrastructure that allows us to understand who every single customer is with clarity. And to do that in a way that works not just for the loyalty business, not just to drive the customer experience that we deliver in the airline, but works in a way that informs the operation, informs how we drive pricing, informs how we think about servicing, so that we've got this marketing-led opportunity around personalization, powered by the data that we generate in this platform. But it leads to a better service experience. It leads to a more efficient operation across the enterprise. We've had, as we all do in this industry, in the aviation sector, we've had some pretty interesting days this year. We have interesting days every week. So it's one of the most exciting industries because literally every day, if it's happening in the world, it's happening to major global airlines. We see the effect of economic pressure. We see the effect of geopolitical issues. We see the effect of things that happen at a city level. Weather affects us every day. And so being able to navigate all of that, one of the most powerful assets that we've built is an understanding of who every single customer is in our environment. And we didn't have that not that long ago, surprisingly. MileagePlus was the core of how we thought about the relationship with customers. And we've evolved that identity strategy to create effectively an identity spine that serves the entire enterprise. And I think and I'm going to talk a little bit about where we're going with artificial intelligence and technology and the way that's creating opportunity and risk for all of us. But I think that's absolutely critical for everyone in this room to think about, how do you build and structure the data that's going to power your business into the future? And you have to have an understanding of who that customer is. And it generally is more than just the loyalty business. And I say just the loyalty business, I mean that not every customer is part of your loyalty program. You're never going to get 100%. You shouldn't have 100%. And so when that's the case, you have to have a model that allows you to understand every customer so that you can build in a better data flow, a better data feed into the business. And that's really how we think about, again, back to this flywheel, as we build this ecosystem, are we generating more data, more insights? Can we then sort of operationalize those insights in ways that inform the kind of partners that we go out and speak to, the kind of marketing that we run? So all of my career sort of led me to United. It's funny, I remember a week into the job, someone's like, how is it? I'm like, oh man, I've never felt more like a round peg in a round hole. It's this great opportunity to kind of bring to life all this experience of working across loyalty in all its shapes and forms, but especially in travel and payments and retail, which all come to life inside travel loyalty programs, to really build that. So, over the last 8 years, we've gone from a program that had sort of, if I think back, so low single-digit millions per year joining the program, to now kind of, hunting close to double-digit millions every single year coming into the program. The active member population that we have, is now over 40 million members in a given sort of 12-month period. Huge numbers compared to where we were. And so we've really focused on how do we accelerate and drive engagement with our travelers, because that is a currency. That creates, incredible value that we can then go out and market to partners with, and ultimately our business model for loyalty is selling our miles. That's how the loyalty program books billions of dollars of value that we can go out and expose to the market in the street and talk about the value of this business inside the airline. And so that's been really critical for us. We've made strategic and thoughtful changes to our program over this 8-year period to drive scale, to make it simpler and easier to join, to drive the level of participation that we want to see from our customers, which in turn drives our active rate up, to make it more valuable. I always grin when I see these devaluation blogger stories because they're wrong across the board. What we are always doing is rebalancing and optimizing where we're placing value. The secret to these loyalty programs is they're about driving value and growth. And so we need to make sure we're deploying the value that we have available towards those customers who are doing the things that are value adding for us, and encourage more customers to do more of those things. And so I think we've done a great job driving that. And again, I look to colleagues over at Delta. I think they also have done an excellent job sort of driving premiumization of the business. And so we've focused on that a lot. But when I came in, that's all we were focused on. It was like, how do we drive a great program for premiers? And we took a step back to say, actually, we can build a much bigger business if we make it awesome for everyone. It's got to appeal to general members as much as it appeals to prems. The value equation can be very different. but we have to be relevant and meaningful to every customer that comes in our front door and give them a reason to consider being a part of MileagePlus. So more and more of what we're doing in terms of our program partners is part of that. We recently announced Starlink. I talked about that last year when we were up here. And that Starlink relationship, if you fly United, and we're rolling it out across our regional fleet currently, and it's begun, the sort of rollout's begun on our mainline fleet as well. And it's a mind-blowing experience. It's like being literally on your living room, streaming whatever show you want to watch while you're on a Zoom call, which has its own challenges on a flight. While you're also sort of, answering emails and sending attachments, and it just feels like you're in real time at home or in your home office. That model, one of the early things we had to work through with Starlink and with the business was like, how are we going to pay for it? And we agreed that the way that we would create the business case was to drive customers to become members. That's one of the most valuable things we can do. So Starlink's free when you're a MileagePlus member. And so, we've set that up and set up the infrastructure to really support that and drive membership growth around it. That's been incredibly powerful and will continue to be. So, big focus on making it simple, having broad appeal, making sure that we're understanding where the value comes from so that we can then continue to design around that and double down on it. But all of this is around creating a broad ecosystem which delivers on our mission, which is, you can see it up on the screen here. And that's the Connective logo up top, because we think about our business, Connective, as the amalgam of MileagePlus, the loyalty business, and Connected Media, the media business, because the two really work in concert with each other. And at the core of this, the mission that we live by every single day is how do the things that we do add value for our travelers? How do we make it awesome for customers? To really transform this to be a customer-centric business. And so that's always the first test in anything we do. Like, how is this enriching travelers' journeys? And then how does it pay off for our partners? And then how does it pay off for us? And if we can answer all three of those, then we go ahead and we do those things. And if we can't, then we're at the drawing board thinking about how do we need to flex and adjust what we're working on so that it achieves that outcome. But that's really, that's the biggest takeaway I'd say, and one of the biggest changes for our business over the time I've been there has been really reshaping the way we think about loyalty, not as this separate marketing function or as this team that's out there running this program on the side that's generating a ton of cash, which is how it was thought about for a long time, but rather as a strategic cornerstone of the entire enterprise that generates data, that generates customers, that generates cash, and that generates an ecosystem model that we can use to build great relationships, great partnerships that deliver on this mission that you can see up on the screen. So it's been a pretty exciting time.
So what you're saying, Luke, just to make sure I understood you correctly, is right. You don't think of the program as one former major airline CEO recently liked to refer to his program as the card program.
Mm-hmm. We do not. That's right.
I shouldn't say anything more on that.
No.
Dare we get nasty letters from lawyers? No, but it's an interesting point because we talked about just the sheer number of zeros that are generated by, especially in the United States, by major programs. Mm-hmm. I mean, it is mind-boggling. So for the C-suite, it's a double-edged sword, right? I mean, We've been fighting as program managers for years to have a seat at the table and to get attention paid by the C-suite to our programs. Then they do pay attention to it, but perhaps the wrong reasons. Mm-hmm. And now we've had to fight the argument of we are more than just a credit card, revenue program. You mentioned about broadening the base. I had a couple of questions on that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
When I think about and I think about what Delta, will talk through as well, including explaining some of their recent changes, and I look at Americans' changes over, post-COVID or through COVID as well. If we go back 10 years, the reality is when we look at the United, Delta, and American, it was a game of Delta says, and United and American literally would carbon copy whatever they did.
Yeah.
It's very different. That's a very different landscape now. All three major airlines, the programs have gone on very different strategies, but there are some commonality when I look at all three about broadening the base.
Yeah.
When I think about this, and tell me if this is a good read on it or not, I see that some people will criticize, existing elites might criticize, well, you've made qualification criteria very, very hard now, in terms of spend requirements and things to get to 1K or whatever else, or platinum. But on the flip side, the program is now relevant to infrequent flyers, once-a-year flyers, twice-a-year flyers, that people would never make Premier Elite status, for example.
Yep.
But you're making the program relevant to whether it's, and I think about Americans' changes too, whether it's fee waivers, whether it's free Wi-Fi, whether it's a more advanced boarding group, simply for being a member of the program, not to mention, of course, partner offers and things like that. Is that a fair way to think about it? That, yes, on one hand, to use your term about rebalancing, yes, on one hand, there are going to be some areas where things are more challenging than they were before, perhaps elite qualification at the top level, but then the program is more relevant for the average person who might have just been like, that's not for me because I'm not a frequent flyer.
So I think it comes back to value, and it comes back to understanding the value of all of your segments and your deciles and however you think about slicing your program up. I mean, it's super interesting. Your comment was right on about this idea that it was just sort of this game of followership for a long time. It was one of the fun things when I joined, and my boss was like, "Oh, and Delta just did this. Should we do it?" Or I wanted to. I was like, "No, we shouldn't. We're going to chart our own course here, and it's going to be different for the following reasons." And so I do think you've seen some very distinct shifts and changes, and then some of them end up sort of gravitating back more towards a mean because they're logical, smart things to do. But at the end of the day, I think where we drove a lot of the early strategy around simplify it, scale it, do a better job of aligning the value we get with the value we give, and then rebuild Premier around all of that. There was sort of these 4 strategic pillars I laid out for the team literally back in 2018. It was driven by this understanding of where does value come from. And we'd done, this, so think back to then, Premier was built around distance. And I think it's super interesting what Alaska have done, where it's like you can qualify based on distance and spend and frequency, and you can choose. I think distance is risky. It's especially risky if you're a large global carrier that flies ultra long distances, but also competes on certain routes against some low-cost players who serve very cheap tickets on those routes. So the launch of Basic Economy meant that you could then fly United on some of those same distances and long routes, but not pay a lot for it. So we had, back when we were largely distance-based for Premier, we had, so we required distance and frequency, and, you could spend your way to sort of, not requiring the frequency, you still had to fly the distance. And so we had customers, if we did this decile analysis, we had customers who were worth top decile silvers and golds that were worth a multiple more to us as a company than our bottom decile 1Ks. Because we had all these customers that they were just gaming the system. They knew how to get these top levels of value without spending a lot. And I actually think it's interesting because I think that there's a degree of that happening now in the world that we all live in. And it's sort of powered by transferable currencies to a certain extent, where the value that accrues back into the airlines, the supplier of the core product that drives this ecosystem, we don't necessarily see all of that value coming through. It's being sort of arbitraged and sliced off along the way, that's a whole separate conversation. But I think it comes back to understanding across your customer base, how do you think about value? How do you understand the behaviors that drive value? And once you have that understanding in place, and it's got to be not just sort of point in time, how do you build a system and a model that allows you to track it in real time so that these are the customers that generate cash. These are the customers that generate cash and margin. These are the customers that actually generate a lot of cash, but they're super expensive for us. And then these are the customers that generate very little cash, and they're super costly for us. So, and you design around that. And so that's, I think, one of the big shifts that you've seen in these programs is really designing around a recognition that at the end of the day, it's a business. And if you run it like a business, you make smart business choices in the way you shape the program, design the experience, set the thresholds. And so you end up doing things that, for example, may take a benefit that was only available to your very top tier customer. You say, actually, we're going to make that available to all our prems. And you'll get customers who are in that top tier, and they'll say, devaluation. But as the operator of the program and the owner of the P&L, I'll look at it and say, actually, it's going to generate X tens or hundreds of millions of dollars in value for us over the next 3 to 5 years. I'd be an idiot not to do this. So I need to now balance to make sure I'm not upsetting that top tier so much that they say, well, I'm out, I'm going to someone else. And so that's why you've seen, I think, in the last 6 years, far more change every year in these programs. It used to be that it was like you'd announce new program thresholds and then you'd sit on them for 5 years and nothing else would happen. And now I think there's a lot more thought every year into saying, how do we adjust around the edges? How do we build our programs so we're doing a great job of maximizing the value of every single one of our customers as much as we can? So hopefully that answered your question.
No, I know. I think that's great. Yeah, I mean, you talk about segmentation and just when you talk about the flywheel as well, about personalization and sort of, the roadmap of what you've been working on.
Yeah.
And obviously it's a buzzword, and yes, we've been talking about it in all the sessions. But with everything you're working on and the integration of technology, the broadening of the remit of, what you're looking after, it's not just this loyalty program that sits off to the side, like you said.
Yep.
Where's the line between creepy versus helpful personalization?
It's a great question. That creepy line, I think, I'm going to jump ahead one slide here because I've got these sort of, like these 5 talking points that I think I was thinking, all right, I'm going to get up and talk to you guys. And, what do I think? What would I want to know about the stuff that we're working on that's not, I'm not disclosing any trade secrets. And at the same time, I'm sharing some of the things that I think any good operator of a program should be thinking about in terms of where and how they drive growth. So I'm going to pause on answering for 30 seconds, and I'm going to talk about like the second point up here, which is around identity. And I mentioned before, you have to build out this identity spine in your business as a hedge against the future. Like if you don't do that, you'll be eaten by technology. You'll be eaten by AI and where that's going. And I'm going to talk about that in the 5th point up here and why I think that's not like a scary statement, but a reality that we're all dealing with. So that's the starting point. You need to build an infrastructure that allows you to understand who the customer is every time you interact with them. In a perfect world, and it's sort of this loyalty dream. I remember selling this as a consultant, selling strategy services in loyalty to banks and airlines. I was like, you should be trying to work towards running your business as a P&L of 1. You should be able to understand the lifetime value of every single customer in your business, and you should be able to make smart, optimizing decisions about the offer you put in front of them, how you communicate with them, how you compensate them when they have a shitty experience, how you do all these things. You need to be able to, that should be the end goal. And then I sort of dealt with a reality that was like, man, it's going to be super expensive to build out the database and the interaction and capture the information. And that was true. That's not true anymore. It's super cheap. The capabilities are all there. Digital is how we deal with everyone. And so we all sit on the ability to capture that data. The question is, do we build the infrastructure? Do we commit to it to understand who those travelers are? And then do we build the capability, the machine learning capability, the content engines that can take inputs and say, this is Luke, deal with him in this way. As we think about where we're going, do you build out kind of the agentic capability to be able to, on the fly, adjust and adapt and change my experience in a way that's right for me? So I think personalization, in terms of the creepy line, is really all about relevance and value to the customer. There are customers today, like if you go to the UK, I don't know, is there anyone here from the UK? There's some pretty rigid rules around data privacy in Europe and GDPR, and everyone's probably very familiar with that. It's a little more lax and open here in the US, a bit more Wild West. But it's changing, and it's kind of this crazy state-level landscape that we all have to navigate around privacy. But I think what's interesting is I'm a father of 4 kids. If I ask any of my kids if they're worried about the privacy of their data, their answer is not at all. I don't care. Because it's out there. Why would I care? Why do I care about what I put being out there on TikTok, being out there for the rest of my life? Like, as long as I'm not doing stupid things. Then they're like, I don't care. As long as my experience is better for it. That's great. Give me the funny cat videos I want to see. Give me the value that I'm interested in. Don't waste my time. I'll give you my data all day long. Personalize my experience, 100%, no problem. And so I think to a certain extent, you're seeing it today. Customers, the world we're heading towards is, ad-based models and then subscription, paid versions. And customers have shown they're happy to take ads. They're happy to have their data open and available and used because they're getting something for it. They're getting a streaming service or they're getting a content set, whatever it may be. So I think the creepy line is moving all the time. I think it's different for different customers. And I think it comes down to, for that individual, is what they're seeing relevant and is it valuable? And if you check both of those boxes, I don't think there is a creepy line. I think it's just how much a customer's willing to share. You know, I use ChatGPT a lot. I'm sort of a bit of a geek for it. I recently loaded up all of my health data. I pulled down everything and dumped it all in. And I was like, I'm trying to build an agent for myself to basically help me diagnose what's going on. I'm 53. I recently started running marathons. I'm like trying to, be a lot younger than I really am. And I was like, I'm just going to use, and someone asked me, they're like, aren't you worried about like your data being out in the world? I'm like, it's already there. It's out in systems everywhere. And there's going to be breaches and like, who cares about me in that setting? It's like, I'd much rather get the value that I can extract from these systems and these platforms that can help me understand more of what's interesting and meaningful for me. So that's kind of where I lean on it. So it's moving, it's different for different customers. And if you can deliver relevance and value, I don't think customers care.
I know you want to talk about AI, so I'm going to I want to see if there's any questions from the audience while we've got you up here. But maybe I'm really interested to hear your comments on AI, if any further comments on AI, because I think there's a few people nodding their heads about the ChatGPT and kind of stuff's already out there, and do we just accept this? So, but moving on from that, in terms of getting back to sort of the program positioning and strategy and where you're thinking AI is coming in, you started off kind of teased earlier that you don't think it's a threat, but... Yeah.
So I'm going to talk to actually points 3 and 4 as I talk about 5 as well. So 3 is personalization, 4 is kind of things we're doing to really defend and grow this loading edge that we have. And then 5 is kind of this AI landscape that we all need to operate in. For anyone that's flown United any time in the last decade plus, in fact, much longer than that, you would have read a magazine in our seat back called Hemispheres. Print magazine, lots of ads, a note from the editor, sometimes a picture and a letter from me. And we also used to run these articles called 3 Perfect Days. And in 3 Perfect Days, we would feature 2 destinations. So 12 magazines a year, 1 a month, 2 destinations, 24 perfect days, 24 destinations. So you do the math. And so we would, this was how we would highlight and promote places that we fly. One of the favorite aspects of Hemispheres, we retired Hemispheres in September last year. So it used to cost us a lot to fly the magazine around, and we retired it. We took it digital. But we didn't just say, all right, turn it into a PDF. We said, let's think about Hemispheres as a platform, not unlike Condé Nast Traveler. Let's build an environment that brings customers into our environment. And I'm going to pivot to why this matters for AI in just a sec. And let's take every destination that we fly and let's make it part of Hemispheres. By the end of this year, we'll have over 330 3 Perfect Days, 1 for every destination that we serve. And at the moment, it's just 1 3 Perfect Days. By this time next year, it's 3 Perfect Days if you're a solo female traveler, if you're a business traveler traveling with colleagues, if you're a dad traveling with your kids, it'll be a different 3 Perfect Days for Chicago or for New York or for Rome or wherever you're going. And so that's where that's all heading. And that then becomes an amazing platform for us with connected media, because we've got a lot of eyeballs and we've got a lot of customers spending time there and wanting to go there because it's a credible, trusted source of engagement. It's interesting. So then we can sell ads in that space. So now it's a new income stream. We can serve offers for products and services and brands and restaurants and retailers that are in those destinations. So that makes it interesting as well for customers. It enriches their journey relevant to where they're going, back to this story of relevance not being creepy. And at the same time, it creates for us a reason for customers to come in our front door. So on the AI threat, my biggest concern, what I'd say the thing that keeps me awake at night, is that customers could stop coming in our front door. They could stop coming to United.com. They could stop using our app for anything other than generating their boarding pass. because they could instead say to their phone or their glasses or their implant, hey, ChatGPT, I need to get from Chicago to New York next week on Tuesday for a meeting at 10 o'clock, and I need to be back by 6 p.m. for my kids' X. You know who I fly, and 20 seconds later, great, here's a flight at this time, gets you back by this time, and I can see that your favorite seat's available. Want me to book it? Book it. I never went to the website, I didn't do any of those things, and I think that's super real. I recently did a trip to Rome, like 2 months ago. I loaded up in ChatGPT my favorite travel writer's recommendations. She publishes these black books on cities, and they're incredible. And I loaded it into ChatGPT, the whole thing. And I was like, build for me an itinerary, but do it in Operator, because I'm going to have questions while I go. And while I was there, I'd be like, all right, I'm here, and I've got 2 hours before my next thing. Based on my itinerary and all the stuff that I like and these recommendations, map out my next 2 hours, and at the end of it, can you book me a setting at this restaurant that has good amatriciana, or if there's a better one on my route, let me know. And literally, it's like, all right, done, and I've got your restaurant booking made for you. And I was like, this is insane. Like, it's super cool and saves a lot of time, but it's also frightening, because it's like, all right, if customers can do this, and this is where I think disruption is coming from for all of us, why would they come to us? Why would they come in the front door? And so this is where I think our loyalty programs are an incredible defensive hedge against this future risk. It's an amazing opportunity. I think we're living in this time where change is happening faster in our generation right now with technology than anything we've ever seen before. The speed of uptake on these platforms is off the charts. And yet, I think we're scratching the surface of the art of potential. So I'm a total techno-optimist. I think there's a ton of upside here, but also pragmatically, I think we have to recognize that there's massive disruptive risk that's very real. It's real for jobs, for sure, and all of us should be thinking about what are deterministic jobs that are sort of rules-based, that we can have LLMs and agents run on our behalf to automate work we do. I've used it for strategy decks recently, and it's mind-blowing how good it is. But I think back to the core business that we have to give customers a reason to keep coming in our front door. So we have to know who they are. We have to be able to offer something that's unique, that isn't just a commodity they can get out in the world easily. So we use the platform and the program to build their identity, to understand who they are, to then create connections with this ecosystem of partnerships and brands that are really powerful. And then from there, it's up to us to make sure that the experience that we offer is, again, unique, is not something that is commoditized, that is, can be bought and sold anywhere in the open market. And that's where I think, the core business that airlines run is safe from the AI risk, but the experience of merchandising and selling and marketing is not. And so, when I talked about hemispheres, that's a long-term hedge for us as we think about what do we need to do to bring customers into our environment and make sure that they want to stick around. So, long answer, but hopefully I hit it.
No, that was fantastic. I think we have time for one question. Very patiently waiting. Do you have a mic, maybe? Yell it out.
First time hearing you speak, thank you. I'm Sarah from Honey Fund. Absolutely so clear the intersection between knowing who the customer is, bringing them value. Knowing who the customer is, all the data in the world, all the behavioral, click tracking and events, doesn't really tell you how they feel, right? It tells you what they do in response to how they feel. But how do you guys think about getting down to how someone feels? For example, with the evaluation of benefits, I'm a gold member, I'm on the upgrade list, but the upgrade list is always 20 people long, and I'm never getting the upgrade of first class with my share status.
Yeah. It's a great question. So I'm gonna hit it on 3 levels. One, again, I think because of how cheap tech's got and how easily we can engage digitally with customers, I think the scale of our always-on interaction and polling and NPS tracking and stuff is now just a constant. And so we're always kind of testing and learning and streaming, did it work economically? Did it work for NPS? Did we piss a whole lot of customers off with this? Or did it deliver the overall lift that we were seeking? So I think, making sure that sort of research platform of how we talk to customers real time as they interact with whatever it is that we're doing is at scale and is a constant, and is then feeding into the business every single day, mission critical. Two, I actually think AI can be super helpful here as well. A lot of that upfront research to understand kind of how customers feel about things that we're thinking about doing before we do them is really interesting. I was at an event earlier this week with a bunch of different CMOs from some major B2C brands, and we were talking about different ways that we're using this technology to think about how to better understand customers and their feelings. And I'll share something that one of these companies did that blew my mind. They paid for a research agency to essentially run for them a really interesting quant study on some things that they were thinking about doing with customers that were all designed to understand customer feelings and response to different value props. And then they had done their own work on all the different customer personas in their environment. And then they took this sort of 500-person response quant study and all of their personas, and they created a simulator that simulated the response across their entire customer population. And then they ran that simulated model against a whole lot of different economic factors to say, what happens if unemployment goes to here? What happens if we do this and now, like interest rates are at this new level? Like, what's it going to do to my business? And like, they did that. Once they had these results and they already had the personas, they ran these simulations in a day. And they had this sort of exec level readout with high confidence on sort of how to think about the customer response. And there was discussion around how do you validate that against, is that really how customers feel? And they thought about that, and then they went out and ran groups, like actual qual groups, and they had like a 98% fit with the output from the models and the way customers said they felt. So again, like I think how we use technology today is changing massively and rapidly to really get into what historically was super expensive and super slow. To really understand sort of how customers feel. And then the third point, which I think is really key, is to your point, we think a lot about clicks and conversions and all this sort of bottom of funnel stuff. And I think as it gets harder to bring customers to your website, and it gets harder to bring customers to your app, which I genuinely think is going to happen to all of us, the importance of your brand at the very top, I think, is going to expand. And so I think brand marketers have been doing it tough for a little while because everything's become performance driven and it's about clicks and conversions. And if you lose your way with your brand, then I think it's challenging. I actually think it's one of the things I'm most proud of at United. I led brand for 5 years, so I'm proud of it because it happened on my watch. It was something that was one of the very first things I did when I stepped into that role in 2020. And that was to transform the United brand. Because we didn't have a clear brand strategy. We talked about connecting people and uniting the world. I was like, well, every airline that flies over water does that. It's not different. That's not a reason for someone to rock up to their kid's soccer match on the weekend with their United cap on and be super proud of what they do and what they stand for. So we did a lot of work with our customers and our employees instead of with an ad agency to say, tell us how you feel. Like, what does United do that makes you feel awesome? And what emerged from that is there was this relative white space in the market, and we were naturally there, and especially with the leadership that we have in the company right now under Scott, and that is to be a force for good in the world, as the world's biggest airline, to create economic impact and value and do the right thing for our employees. And this is right around the time that we made a decision around vaccination. I'm not going to get into politics because not everyone will agree with this, but we said, listen, it's irresponsible of us to put our employees out on the front line of dealing with people and not be vaccinated. So if you want to work at United, you have to be vaccinated. We're one of the first companies in the US and one of the first in the world to say it's mandatory. If you want to work here, get vaccinated. Otherwise, you're no longer working here. And, and again, not everyone will agree with the politics, and that, I think that's bonkers, but, that it became political. But the idea that we were a force for good led to this brand position around good leads the way, and that has become sort of a calling cry for our business. And I think, and it changed the way we talk about and represent our brand out in the world as a much more modern and human and caring brand. And that matters. And I get friends and, they say, look, it's like United's cool now. Like it's different and it feels different. And so I think that focus on brand is going to be more and more and more important because we will get fewer and fewer opportunities to put the offer and the sort of tile and the banner in front of customers because there's going to be fewer of them coming to our website and fewer of them coming to our app because they'll come to us first through other intermediaries and agents. And it's already happening to an extent with flexible currencies and I saw last night the drinks were sponsored by Points here. There are companies out there essentially inserting themselves in the middle between the brand and the customer. And so as that happens, that's risky for us. And so our loyalty platform is an opportunity for us to think about how we evolve that. But you can't just think about it as a loyalty program. You have to think about it as that flywheel. The core business, the loyalty program, your other ancillary businesses, how do they work as a system to build an amazing brand story? And how do they work as a system to build relationships that drive value?
I see Bart smiling to himself. He's very proud that you noticed his logo on the
Hey, Bart.
table cards last time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Luc Bondar, thank you so much
Thanks,
for all the insights as always.
Thank you. Good stuff.